This is Stani. I'm a violinist and artistic director for PhiloSonia chamber music series. And also I've started recently my own group called Make Music Your Own. And this is our interview series called Own Your Voice. Today it's a little unusual. We didn't mean to do a live for this. This was supposed to be a pre-recorded interview, but we decided this might be the best way to do it. So if you happen to be watching, if you're a night owl, welcome. Episode 3 to Own Your Voice. Today I have a very special guest, my husband, Mike Brofman, who I'm going to show in a bit, but just wanted to tell you a little bit more about today. The topic for today is how to really what is the path forward for performance not-for-profits? And so that's why I have my husband as a guest, since he started his own company at the age of, I think, 23 or 25. And that now they're in their 10th season, and he's going to tell us more about it. But now I'll welcome to the studio, Mike Brofman.
Live from the kitchen.
So Mike, can you introduce yourself for those who don't know you?
I'm Mike Brofman. I'm the artistic director of the Brooklyn 𝙗𝙤𝙪𝙧. I live in the same house as Stani. Yeah, I'm also a pianist. I focus on the art song repertoire and accompanying singers. So I've worked with a lot of singers in my day, and that's where most of my performing focus is on.
Great. And so at what age did you start Brooklyn 𝙗𝙤𝙪𝙧?
I believe I was 23, because even though the first concerts were in October of 2010, I really started planning for it a full year before that.
Mm-hmm.
So that means, yeah, it was probably...
Yeah, so that's pretty young. What made you start your own company at that age, when you could have done a lot of other things? And what really made you want to do that?
Well, I was just out of college, graduated from Northwestern and back in New York City. I'd suffered from a performance-related injury when I was finishing college, so I wasn't able to play, and I wasn't able to audition for grad school as I had planned, and I was sort of on the path of undergrad, grad school, doctorate, professorship, and that kind of got thwarted. And I was at home. I always loved two things. I loved programming, coming up with programs, thinking not just about performing the music, but the experience the audience had over multiple pieces, and designing a season. I always loved, well, you see, I still do it. When we get in the mail, Carnegie Hall or New York Phil or anybody's new season, the first thing I do is I take it and with a pen and I mark it up and take notes on it and see what they're doing and what they're programming together. So that's always fascinated me. And then at the end of college, I really discovered art song. I actually discovered art song in a collaborative piano class, which for some undisclosed reason we didn't take until senior year of college.
Mm-hmm.
But as I mentioned, my hand was injured, and every other professor sort of let me out of my obligations to perform. And I had one, the collaborative teacher was actually not very nice, and basically said, nope, if you don't play in my class, I fail you. I don't really believe that injuries are a real thing. So no excuses. So I was assigned Robert Schumann's 𝙗𝙤𝙀𝙀, and basically in the 15 minutes I could muster to practice every day, I would learn one song of 𝙗𝙀𝙀 to perform in class, and that's all I did. And that experience sort of opened the world of art song to me, and sort of made me discover it and appreciate it in a very different way. Sort of longing and loss are sort of common themes in art song, and that was definitely apropos to what I was feeling at the time. So from there, I was out of school. I started studying with teacher Robert Durso of the Galansky Institute in the Talman approach, which permanently resolved my hand issues. So I had the viola to play, and it was 2010, which was another time when the economy was in upheaval, and it just seemed like there was no prospect of getting a standard job. There was no real desire to go to school, so I sort of dove in, sort of in blissful ignorance, into forming Brooklyn Art Song Society.
You're kind of answering my question. I was going to ask how it must have been so scary to do something like that, not knowing so little or having so little experience running an organization at that age, especially. So I guess that explains it. Just the kind of the chaos and kind of situation similar to today's, I guess. Just
yeah, I also just didn't know. I was just stupid. Like I didn't realize that it was a difficult thing to do. It's like the story they tell, about oboe students that, that you take two oboe students, and the first one you tell them how you have to make your own reeds, and it's really hard and you have to really work at it, and here's exactly what you need to do, and and then that person comes and they really struggle with it, and then you tell the other kid, here, oboists make their own reeds, here's the tools, go make your own reeds, and then that student comes back and they make perfectly fine reeds. I think half of the challenges of things are just the notion that it's undoable, or the idea that it's difficult, and that attitude. And if you're not even aware that it's supposed to be hard, somehow it just isn't.
So that's, I guess, your secret that time of starting, was just not really knowing, not really thinking about the
yeah, because then you're sort of a blank slate, and you just do what you need to do, and as things come up, and you just sort of figure it out, and you're not beholden. Sometimes the reason why things are hard is because there's sort of a certain set of answers that ways you're supposed to solve certain problems, and they're based on assumptions that are either not right or not right for you. And if you just don't even know that you're supposed to be doing that, and you do it in the way that's better, that's that's a better way to be.
That's a great, it's a great way to put it. And I feel like a lot of our limitations are set early in life, either in school early or in college. And I feel like we're told what we can and cannot do. And I mean, all schools are great, and we get a lot of great education. And I'm very thankful for everything. I know all institutions are at fault at this to some degree.
Well, I think especially, the idea of the conservatory is the sort of, music conservatory is the 19th century European model, which, has has a sort of illustrious tradition, but it also has, there is nothing else in the world we do the way we did it in the 19th century. Like, if you went to a doctor and the doctor says, I've been, doing medicine from the long tradition that goes all the way back to 1847, I'm going to give you the medicine that, they gave in the illustrious height of the Romantic era, you'd be like, no, thank you. Like, that doesn't make much sense. So it is, I think you have to always understand the body of knowledge from the conservatory system through that prism. It's not that there's isn't value there, but it's what the knowledge they're giving you is based on tradition and passed down information and cult of personality of so and so studied with so and so, studied with so and so, studied with Liszt, and or studied with Paganini or whatever, and there's merit to that knowledge, but there's also other ways of thinking that at the very least should compete with that idea, that I think those traditions gone completely unchecked, like any idea going completely unchecked, is inherently bad.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it was great that you really listened to your voice, and you kind of have become your own boss, your own self, and you've really built your voice through your company and throughout your career. What are some of the biggest setbacks and challenges you faced? Because you inevitably do when you do something on your own at that young age.
Yeah, I think that, well, one, you know, the probably the biggest setbacks have to do with money, quite frankly. The name of the game is really resources, you know, I think, and you know, I've faced the reality of spending 40 hours on a grant and then just not getting it. But, you know, every time I did, you know, I can think of, you know, one grant in particular, National Endowment of the Arts, that I really spent a lot of time on and really felt good about it, and then didn't get. But I feel like even every time I didn't get a grant, you know, I was forced to think about, you know, things that I think are a good idea to me. How is this not landing to
Mhm.
somebody else? You know, how do I need to refigure it? And always it ends up pushing me in a direction of branching out of, for example, after I didn't get that new grant, the main criticism they had is, you know, you were doing great concerts and it was a very high level of musicianship, but you weren't really, you know, you weren't really reaching as wide of a community as we liked. You didn't have any sort of outreach
Mhm.
program. You just sort of did the concerts and had people who enjoyed art song come to you. You weren't really getting out there and showing art song to anybody who didn't already know and love it.
Mhm.
And that sort of spawned, you know, the beginning of our outreach program. Um, you know, other setbacks I think is just, you know, uh, realizing things like, you know, challenges with the quality of the instrument that we have to rent a piano for our space, and you know, sometimes with our budget you don't get exactly what you want, and you sort of that's something where you have to learn what, you know, when you have limited resources, what's really worth it and what like you should not skimp on, and what you really need to absolutely have and make sure that you find a way to get.
Mhm.
And I think when you have limited resources and you're constantly making decisions of what to cut or what to make do with, you're going to have to learn that the hard way. You're not
Mhm.
going to, you know, no one has perfect judgment.
Mhm.
You're going to think you can get away with something, and then you're going to find out you can't get away with it.
Mhm. Absolutely. And what would you say? So I'm imagining whoever's watching you, maybe they're thinking of starting their own not-for-profit, maybe they're in school, and just want this to be as helpful as possible for everyone. What do you say, or would you say are your biggest strengths that help you get you where you are? Build your own company. And again, Brooklyn Art Song Society is a very successful art song institution. They've been written up multiple times in New York or New York Times, and have incredible roster of just star singers and pianists. And so that's a huge accomplishment. So what would you say are the strengths necessary or the qualities necessary to create something like this?
um, I definitely think you have to be self-motivated from the point of view of you really have to set your own agenda and then be able to do it. So you have to you have to have a relationship. You know, people say, you know, like the expression "be your own boss." I think if you can look at it in one head, I was like, oh, like you don't have, people view that idea as like you don't have a boss. You just do whatever you want whenever you want to do it. Like, you know, if you want to eat ice cream from the can, you just eat ice cream from the can, you know, whatever. But being your own boss to me is that role of the person who disciplines you and keeps you on track is you, you
Mhm.
know, and that's a very important thing that is not, in a certain way, it's liberating to have someone just tell you what to do and do it. And it's very, it can, you know, I think it's a skill you have to hone to be able to have yourself do stuff. So I think I've become good at being my own boss.
Mhm.
Um, I've become the sheer quantity of work and decisions you need to make in not enough time is very difficult. And I think I've come up with good strategies of just organizing the workload and getting it done efficiently, and
Mhm.
seeing the best order in which to do things. My pro tip I give is, um, when you are unsure of what order to do things, just just be random, because doing stuff is always going to get you closer to it being done than hemming and hawing about what order it needs to be done. Um, and even if that sort of in that round of tasks, you mess it up and you maybe realize that the order in which you did your tasks was not the ideal one, that's just fodder for next time
Mhm.
to hone that. And but you're never going to get there by trying to set up some perfect order in which you do things, you know.
Mhm.
So sometimes I honestly, like, you know, I have my list of things and I just go down the list regardless of their importance. So I end up doing, you know, the little, you know, things that can wait before I do the big things that need to be done.
Mhm.
But the I just but it works, but it just by starting to do it, I kind of get the ball
Mhm.
rolling of motivation.
That's kind of good advice for in general to just think less and like do like when you have to-do list in general, just don't think about it too much. There is just some certain like energy you just have to like get with it, and then you're gonna find out more about it and what needs to be done as you plunge into it and just uh, be active and do more.
Yeah, I mean, my motto is just kind of just do the stuff. Like
Mhm.
there, you know, um, there's a lot of stuff to do. You don't know if it's all going to work. You don't know you don't know the results of things. You know, a lot of it is asking people and seeing if they say yes or no. But like, you know, I just, you know, we're not pushing the button to start the nuclear war. There's nothing in this business we can do that can't be undone pretty easily, you know. So,
Yeah,
you know, so you can, you know, there's no decision you make that you can't, you know, usually amend. So,
awesome. Uh, so so the title of this interview is the path forward for performance non-for-profits. And so I wanted to ask you how to clearly run in difficult situation now, and all non-for-profits particularly are in a difficult place. So what would your advice be for starting non-for-profits or established non-for-profits, especially when it comes to performance and art non-for-profits? What is the best advice right now for the near future? How about, and what would your advice be? Um, what should we do starting next season? That's, I think, the most crucial and hard decisions really come to the beginning of next season. What do we do? And what about long term? What are some things you think need to be done?
um, so I think short term, the name of the game is goodwill, right? Because this is going to be a, a rough patch, no doubt. And you know, in lieu of if you know if you don't have an institution that you're running that's large enough, which none of us are, if you're listening to this podcast, you know, if you're not the Met, if you're not the New York Phil, that's just sort of, you know, quote unquote too big to fail. You know, you just need people to want you to stick around, um, and be on the other side. And so, you know, if you can, you need to pay artists something for the canceled concerts. Brooklyn Art Song Society was in a position to pay everyone in full. I think we were in a somewhat unique, not a unique position, but I can understand not being in that position. We just, because of the nature of art song and, you know, the way the organizations were, we just have very little overhead besides paying the artists anyways.
Mm.
And, but larger organizations have to deal with, you know, larger full-time staff, renting space and, you know, office space and stuff like that, these expenses before they even pay the artist. So, but I think you need to, it'll, whatever you save in not paying the art, you know, in using force majeure in the short term, you're going to lose in goodwill in the long term. That also goes to how you treat your patrons. You know, I think if you sort of, I think you have to very delicately approach, you know, hopefully people will be willing to have already bought tickets to donate the price of their ticket back. But if they're not, I think you need to be understanding, because at the end of the day, those people, even if they ask for their money back, those are the people you're going to have to go back to and ask for donations, and you don't want them, you know, angry and upset. So right now, I think the investment should be not in hoarding resources, but in forming goodwill. And I think a lot of organizations are not thinking that way right now. Quite frankly, they're hoarding resources, and your resources will run out. You're much faster than goodwill, because goodwill will last, but resources will get spent. Next season, I think the goal for every performing arts organization is to minimize risk as much as you possibly can. And I think that'll mean different things for different organizations, but I think you need to make a plan now that you know you can do no matter what happens, even in the worst situation. I think it is a fool's errand to try to do what you were going to do and then figure it out when it's not, the next year doesn't go as planned. So if that means, you know, just committing now to live streaming all your concerts, or at least having, you know, very strong plan Bs in place, but you just need to be able to go to people and saying, one way or another, this is happening. We're not, you know, operating on a, you know, on the, you know, just hoping that things get better. Even if things are bad, we'll still be here, because that is going to form sort of the beginnings of the next, of the sort of long-term thing of of making people know you're going to be around, because the whole point of an institution is that you create institutions so they can weather these kinds of storms. The whole point is that, you know, what we're doing in classical music is of value and needs to be here no matter what, not needs to be here when the stock market is up and, you know, times are good. It needs to be here during the crisis. So I think next year, you just need to survive by any means necessary, and be present by any means necessary. And then long term, so I think that there's a practical answer to that question and then a more philosophical answer to the question. So the practical thing is, I think you need to utilize the technology and the things that we're doing now to sort of keep society afloat, like Zooming and live streaming and all that stuff. That needs to be incorporated, and it probably honestly should have been incorporated into our, you know, our business model long ago, and now we're getting a big wake-up call that
Hi, Lynn. Just wanted to say hi, Lynn.
hi. And, you know, I think every, you know, live audience, you know, this is a live, classical music is a live experience, and it should be, and it will always be. But that doesn't mean that it can't be subsidized by live streaming and online things, and reaching new audiences that way. So I think probably what's going to happen is, you know, right now, because we have no choice, the sort of balance is going to be way up here, you know, online content, live streaming and stuff like that, way down here, live. And I think we're all going to have to try to get it more back into balance, and that's that's the sort of practical business model thing. And I think the good news is, I think, you know, you can kind of solve two problems in the long term with this new business model, because you can, one, if you have the, you know, a very inexpensive option to sort of watch the concert by live stream that you can do from any place in the world and have theoretically infinite audience, you can just bring in a lot more revenue, you know, which in turn can keep ticket prices for the live event down, because you can, you know, make it up with streaming, and then that'll, you know, create a virtuous cycle of the ticket prices go down. That makes it more accessible. More people come to classical music concerts live, and you're making more revenue from the other side of the streaming. And then I think that's a a long-term solution to some of the financial difficulties of classical music. Um, the more philosophical answer is that we need to sort of have a reckoning of why classical music exists, right? You know, the whole idea of a not-for-profit is that we're not something that's here because we create wealth. We're something here that has value to society, even if it's losing money. That we're here because this experience of sort of sitting in a room with other people, sort of experiencing something meaningful happening in the moment, is a sort of intrinsic part of human existence. And without it, we lose part of our humanity. And if that is the case, we need to make that case now that we can't go away, because that's the only hope we have. We can't perform, we can't provide a service, we can't do pretty much anything that can bring in revenue, but all we can do is say we need to be here. It is, we are, because it's the buzzword now, we are an essential service. And if you don't do what it takes now to be here, you're going to lose something essential. And we need to refine that argument in our in our messaging for fundraising, I think, because too much of the fundraising in classical music has been sort of to be seen, glitzy, be fancy, be part of the elite, be, in and not that sort of core urgency messaging. And so I think that's, where we need to go on the sort of more, for our existential survival over the next 5 years. And I think we'll get there, because I think people, I always say, sort of in my pitch for fundraising, I say, like, without this, we lose part of our humanity. And, even I was like, just a line I say, and we're all seeing it now. We don't have to tell people, imagine a world without this. We have all lived the world without this now, and it sucks. Right. So we have, as horrible as it is, we have the best, living example of why you need to support the arts that everyone has lived through. And, I am shameless in taking advantage of it to try to make sure that organizations like Brooklyn Art Song Society and all organizations that provide, high quality arts survive in the long run. So that's my pitch.
Terrific. Well, so in a way, so we have to be, more than ever, we have to be really strong advocates for art.
Yeah, I mean,
we appeal to our donors, our base, and our supporters, knowing that, like, asking them to step it up in times when there's so little we can do, but knowing that we are here for the long term. Really appealing to our donors and supporters and audience goers. And you mentioned something about, like, do you think, because it's so hard with so much free content everywhere, do you think, do you think many institutions would adopt a model where they charge for virtual tickets, if we're forced to mostly do virtual performances for a while? Could you see that as becoming a model?
Yeah, I mean, we're about to find out, right? There are organizations like the Berlin Phil has a really excellent, digital concert hall. I think that there will be the people who support it, just for the sake of supporting it. I think, I think as long as you're creating new content, I don't think you can go and take things that were just up on YouTube and take them down and now say they cost $5.95 to watch. I think if you're creating new content and you can sort of, you film something and and it has the experience of being live, and there's something about knowing that it was just created and that you're seeing it, fresh. I think that for now will be fine. And then I think, in the long term, I think there'll be value in it, in that if you want to see a Brooklyn Art Song Society concert, but you live in Topeka, it's just a lot cheaper to pay $5.95 to watch it on your computer than to fly to Brooklyn, And so I think what we need to remember is that the live, the computer stuff, the stuff on the screen, that's not the thing. This is all supplement for the thing, which is the live experience. And if we forget that, And I think it's going to be easy to forget that and just get drawn into the shiny screen a little bit too much.
Mhm.
I think you're gonna you're gonna and also just thinking carefully from marketing of we need to be careful to not be saying to people, look, this is just as good as live. This is replacing live. This is the new live. It's not, and it never will be. And people are going to turn off really fast from that because they're going to feel like they're just going to feel sad about what they can't have. But if instead you sort of empathize and be like, this is not the thing. This is, a distant second best. This is what we can do now. And then, so we can get back on our feet to doing the live thing and reminding people of that, I think is a much better
Mhm.
message.
Absolutely. So I want to say hi, Julia. A friend of mine. Haven't seen you so long.
I was like, what's she doing up?
Sorry.
And she said Julia, and I was like, what's Julia doing up
Oh,
on
no.
Facebook?
Julia is also our little baby, Julia. Yeah. So something you mentioned earlier, I think is really important. That we need to appeal to our audience and to our donors, and that we're very dependent on the relationship with them. You said earlier. And how do you build trust and loyalty? How do you create and build? I know it takes time and effort, but what would you say are the most important things in building a loyal and devoted audience and donor base?
Oh, I mean, I think it goes without saying, the quality of the music. I think just having personal relationships with them, calling them up when or shooting them an email if they're sick and they can't make a concert, just knowing what they like. I know certain, supporters of ours what their favorite composers are, and so whenever we're programming it, I can just shoot
Mhm.
them a message saying like, "Hey, look what we have coming up. This, your favorite." Just
Mhm.
just treating people like people. Like I mean, that's
Mhm.
that will go. That's something that a small organization do that like the New York Phil just can't. Like, maybe the New York, the people who work at the New York Phil know the famous favorite pieces of like the $10 million donors, but just people feeling like you're approachable, if they ask you questions, and just your that and just yeah, just trying to form that personal relationship with them, and then just being as consistent as you possibly can, and being mindful also of the whole experience of concert going, of what it's like when they come to take their tickets, what it's like, buying their tickets, and making sure that all of that to the good you can is smooth, because that's part of the concert too. Sort of, you can't
Absolutely.
be in this tunnel vision of I just walk on stage and play and then walk back to the practice room and practice and walk back on stage and play. Like that's not gonna cut it.
I think that's crucial because again, those are skills and that we don't really learn at school. Like really, the whole process of creating audience to the performance to after the performance to follow up. Those are a lot of different stages of a performance that we don't always talk about. Yeah, we're trained to practice and learn our pieces, but there's so much more once you really want to develop an audience, when you really want to reach people and have people transformed. It takes all these before and after the performance that we don't often talk about, and that's why I guess that's where really a lot of people maybe that's why maybe a lot of business not-for-profits are not successful, and maybe when you're young it's so much harder to see that bigger picture. Absolutely.
Yeah,
um,
I do think that there is. I think one of the things you learn in college that or one of the sort of things that they teach you in college or make you think rather than teach
mhm,
is that performing and being a musician is pure, and if you're sort of a grimy, dirty sort of cheater, you
mhm,
deal with the politics of it and you deal with the business side of it. That's for, but then you're an unpure, sort of
mhm,
not true artist. You're just
mhm,
dealing with and you're getting ahead by not by the merit of your musical ability, but by some cheap,
mhm,
you know, other thing. And I think, but to me, the skills of all of these other skills, I think comes from my understanding of music, and that, you know, to me, everything has a rhythm, and even just responding to emails has a rhythm. Like there's people send at a certain time, and then there's a logical place to respond to it. I view that as a large scale rhythm, or just how you plan your fundraising over the course of the years, the way that Mahler puts the peaks and valleys in a movement of a symphony, right? It's just large scale timing.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that if you're someone who only feels like you only have the musical ability, and you don't understand, or you've been sort of inundated with this idea that it's less than to
Mhm.
deal with those things, I really view those things musically,
Mhm.
if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
I think the skills as a musician that I do are very easily applicable to those things, and very just part of it to me. It's part of being a musician with a capital M.
Mhm. Absolutely. Hi, Ellen.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are really big, important points. And just to summarize, so to really get through these difficult times, it's important to develop a trusting and loyal donor base and audience, caring about every person that comes to your concerts, paying personal attention, and really and this will be a time when you really appeal to them to help you get through this for the long haul. And quick question, maybe now it's pretty late. I think we're both kind of tired, but
Yeah.
and maybe some fun questions. What are some of your music idols, and what do you admire in them? Classical,
Musical.
non-classical, any? What are the qualities you admire in an artist?
I think so. I've been watching a lot of conductors recently in my this in my quarantine state, um, and watching a conductor like Gustavo Dudamel, and just I think what a great conductor understands is just what's inside a musical gesture, like what a musical gesture means, right? And that's what they're, because when I'm watching these Berlin Philharmonic live streams, and the Berlin Philharmonic doesn't need to know when to come in. Like they don't need to know, like how many beats to wait until their entrance. So they're really guiding them in sort of the musical nuance.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that playing fast and loud, or virtuosity, sort of dime a dozen. Do a Google search for like 5-year-old Paganini, and you'll get, you know, little kids on half-size violins perfectly playing, the first caprice or whatever. Um, but there's sort of, so that, and that's sort of, those are the very finite things about music. But all the musicians that I deeply admire, I feel, are able to get deeper and deeper inside, you know, in what the music's saying. So um, Yefim Brofman is a pianist that
Mhm.
I think is incredible, and is also sort of, even though they all have chops. It's just sort of his as he's gotten older, he's gotten much more insightful as a musician.
Mhm.
And better and better and better when he's at a place in his career when he could really just rest on his laurels and show up and play, and people will do it. And plenty of pianists at his same stature and his same, you know, age are kind of doing that right now in his career. But I think he's getting wiser and more thoughtful in his playing.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of singers, I love Ian Bostridge. You know, another person I think is getting sort of wiser with
Mhm.
age. And I grew up listening to 𝙗𝙗𝙗, who's kind of a junk singer sometimes, but is always, exactly that, going after
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
the meaning of the words.
Mhm. What are some things that recharge you away from music? Where do you get your energy from? Like, yeah.
Um, I love to read,
Mhm.
um, and I read a lot of philosophy. I read a lot of poetry, and yeah, that's definitely the thing I do besides music the most. Besides watch junky videos on YouTube,
Mhm.
I don't think counts. Um, but yeah, no, I think ever since I remember just like one summer when I was like 12, I just decided to read as many books as I possibly can in the summer, and then I sort of didn't stop reading. But no, I think that you know, again, a great book, a great poem. Obviously, the connection to art song and poem and poetry is pretty obvious, but even great philosophy or great novel works the same way that a great symphony does,
Mm-hmm.
in just that the logical flow of ideas is done in such a way that it maximizes the emotional effect. And looking at how a philosopher or a writer does that, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's extremely valuable.
Absolutely. What can you tell us? I know you haven't announced your next season yet. Is there anything you would want to share with as little or as much about your planning process or what you're excited about next season? Because that's, it's a hard place to be, but you're such a strong leader and a positive person and also great planner. So I know you already have your season.
Yeah,
What are you excited about?
I do. I want to keep some of the details kind of under wraps right now, only because things are in flux and I don't want stuff out there that.
Yeah.
But I do want to say that overall, I'm honestly very excited for next year because um, as it's going to be a real challenge and there's a lot of risks and there's a lot of things that could go wrong. But this is kind of what we're in it for. We're in it for the fight, right? We're in it. We have been tasked with the awesome responsibility of keeping this art form alive.
Mm.
And as scary as it is, that's it's up to us. There's no one else. And there's something exciting about kind of like fighting against this giant force against us. There's something that is purifying about sort of being stripped of all comfort and just kind of having to just roll up your sleeves. I mean that's how Brooklyn Art Song Society started in 2010. It was the height of the of the Great Recession, and it was just like here goes nothing, and it kind of makes you feel a little bit like a kid again to be you know that's me being optimistic. But yeah, I think this is the year that we fight, right? This is the year that we the wheat is separated from the chaff. And so as it keeps me up at night, but there's something invigorating about that too.
Absolutely, yeah. Totally agree. And then the fight for preserving something so great, something so essential for us as humans, as you said. And the more artistic directors, the more arts leaders believe in that and stay positive. And I think the stronger we're all going to come out of this. Absolutely. Thank you, Mike, so much for joining me from far away.
I'm going to start the long trek back from the kitchen to the bedroom.
So this is going to air tomorrow, Friday at 12. So when you see this, we won't be live, but we will be live in the chat.
We'll be alive. We just
hopefully we'll be alive too. But we'll be in the chat. So would love to continue this conversation. Questions and comments, anything we'll be able to answer real time while you watch this interview tomorrow. So thank you so much, Mikey, and thank you everyone for watching. I hope this has been helpful, inspirational, and again, Make Music Your Own is here for you, and feel free to write to us in the comments something you want to see, or what did you take away from this interview? What is one thing you found inspiring, and how can you make it your own? How could you implement this in your life, in your career, in your not-for-profit, to really change it and make it that much better? Thank you all for watching. Thanks, Mike. And I'll see you next week. Bye.